So in the last video, we built a data table that sensitized offer prices and leverage ratios for the term loan and regressed that against the IRRs. Let me just recalculate because I want to make sure the numbers are right here. So these were the numbers we had. I actually removed the conditional formatting because I'm going to sort of show you some more conditional formatting here. So even though the IRRs are greater than 30% here, it's not being highlighted. I want to focus on another data table. So what I'd like to do is build another data table that deals with what happens when you select approach number 2. So let me just kind of talk that approach number 1. So let me talk about this. If you select approach number 2, like we've had in this entire model, so we built a data table that kind of handles that, where one of the input variables is this offer price, and in Excel behind the scenes will run different offer prices into this cell specifically and spit out the IRRs. The reason why it spits it out is because I have approach 2 selected here, and it's these figures, it's this section from my model that is kind of driving the entire model. So approach number 1 and approach number 2, these are hard inputs, and then the user defines, if you remember from the very beginning of the course, which approach is ultimately going to get used. So from a data table perspective, this creates a bit of a challenge, because even though it's very useful analytically to look at these two approaches, because sometimes you're going to deal with specific offer prices, sometimes you're going to deal with specific EBITDA multiples if you're analyzing a private equity deal. But from a data table perspective, recall that the way data tables work is they'll drop these offer prices into here. But guess what? If approach 1 is selected, whatever's dropped in here makes no difference. It won't matter because this is pulling from approach number 1. So the data table won't really spit out very useful information. In fact, now that I've switched it to approach 1, if I hit F9, you'll see that the IRRs here are basically all the same across all the offer prices. And this is because this data table is no longer that useful. So we've got a little warning in here that says, hey, the explicit offer price per share approach must be selected for the data table to appear, which means that I want to really figure out a way to hide this if I really want to sort of add bells and whistles to the course. Is there a way for me to really hide this when approach 1 is selected? And let me kind of show you how I do this. And then if you scroll up and only show this. And only show this, a data table that actually defines a specific EBITDA multiple. So this is sort of the approach 1 way. If you're trying to analyze a deal and saying, oh, maybe we can get away with buying this for 7 times EBITDA. Maybe we can get away with buying this for 8 times EBITDA. That's sort of just a different vernacular than defining in terms of offer price per share. This is more the way you talk about a public deal. This is more how you talk about a private deal. So let's create, using conditional formatting, something where if you have approach number 2, this goes away. And if you have approach number 1, visually I should say, this goes away. How do I make this go away? And then I'll kind of talk about this data table in the first place. So it's the same thing with conditional formatting, except we have to be a little bit more clever. So with conditional formatting, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Home tab. We're going to create a new rule. Okay. The new rule is use a formula to determine which cells to format. And really the rule that I want to put in place here is, hey, if this equals 1, then I don't want this seen, right? That's really the rule that I'm trying to define. So I want if this equals 1. Now, unfortunately, rules aren't really defined that way with conditional formatting. There's no, you can't add if statements. This is just kind of logically what we want to show. But the way that things are evaluated in conditional formats is either true or false. So I need to put in a statement in here that either evaluates a true or false. Well, what's true is this equals 1. Right? That's going to evaluate to true. And if this evaluates to true, let's add a conditional format. So let's start that. this equals 1. And remember, this is just custom formatting. It says 1 here. That's the actual value here. If that's the case, let's format all of these to just be sort of shaded gray so we don't see anything. And that did evaluate this is 1, so it's shaded off. But I need to do something else. I need to make all of the fonts disappear as well. So let me go to conditional formatting and let me manage the rules. What I really want is I want to sort of change this. I want to edit this rule to add not just shading. In fact, I don't like this. It's a little dark, so let's make the shading a little bit lighter. Let's make the font, the font here, the same color. And now all of these will disappear. So now what's happened is I've sort of accomplished my task, which is approach number 1, you only see the data table on top. Approach number 2, you see the data table on the bottom. And I realize I actually still want to see that instruction. So let me modify this a little bit. I want to clear the rule from here. I actually sort of wrapped too much. So let me clear rules from selected cells. So that way I have it kind of working exactly the way I want. So here, sponsor approach 1 must be selected, and then here, if approach 2 is selected, this is what's going in. And in fact, if I want to get really kind of into this, I can also, I don't really need to flag this error because approach 2 is selected, so I can create a conditional format on this, yet another rule that says, hey, if this equals 2, then let's format the font to be transparent, right? So that goes away. All right, so now I have approach number 2 versus approach number 1. Sort of accomplishing my goal. So now let's talk about this data table. So I'm going to remove this here. The data table here is very much the same as the prior data table that we worked on in the other video. It's pulling the IRR from here, and it's using the term loan A leverage here, and let's make this kind of more true to life 3 times, and it's using an EBITDA multiple. So instead of using an explicit offer price, when approach 1 is selected, this is sort of a useful analysis. Rather than looking at offer price, you want to be consistent, so you want to look at EBITDA multiples. Alt-DT, what's the row input? That's going to be this 3.27 that needs to be replaced, and the column input is going to be this initial EBITDA multiple. Let's grab it from here. So this is what we want to replace behind the scenes. And now you see that the IRRs are going to be higher. The higher the leverage, and the higher the EBITDA, and the lower the EBITDA multiples, which makes sense. So I'm going to zoom out here, and there was a lot of just sort of granular conditional formatting there. So you may have to watch this video a couple of times just kind of to make sure that you understand what's going on. So basically, I just kind of want to bottom line this for you, which is if you want to really get sort of fancy with conditional formatting, not every model has this. I would say that this is definitely in the realm of sort of, discretionary enhancements. But the key reason for it is because if you bake in the functionality of sort of having these 2 approaches in the model, what's going to happen is if you don't somehow hide or shield users from a data table that stresses different EBITDA multiples or sensitizes different EBITDA multiples, when that's not really going to matter in the data table, it's going to be a little confusing for the user. So you want to somehow hide it or somehow, call out some sort of error to kind of flag it for the user. And so that's what we've done here. That's it. So the last data table that we've included in here is a data table that kind of looks at sponsor IRRs at different equity, preferred equity, and subordinated note equity kickers. Now, this doesn't really matter in the BMC deal because there isn't really a lot of subordinated notes. There are no subordinated notes or preferred stock, but let's kind of bring back the hypothetical and kind of show you how that would play out. So if there was some subordinated notes and preferred stock, and they did get an equity kicker, what would that look like? So this is a data table that sort of does that. So I'm going to clear that out. And again, you want to reference the sponsor IRR as the output variable that you're sensitizing. You don't have to sensitize sponsor IRR. It just tends to be in an LBO analysis what the financial sponsors are most interested in. And now if I create the data table, it's Alt-DT. The subordinated note equity kicker is going to be sensitized from here. This is where the subordinated note equity kicker is going to be. It doesn't matter what's in the model. It's just going to replace with all of these numbers behind the scenes. And the same thing for the preferred stock. This is it. I'm going to hit enter, hit F9. And now you see that the higher the equity kickers, the lower the returns to the financial sponsors. Obviously, the more economics you're giving away to others, the lower those returns are going to be. So at this point, what I'd like you to do, guys, is complete these data tables. Try to play with these conditional formats. It kind of makes for a more user-friendly model. And then complete this final data table as well. And when you're ready, we are going to move on. At this point, we have really finished the presentation part of the course. In the next video, we're just going to sort of take a 30,000-foot view again and just kind of make sure that everyone's clear on what's really driving a lot of the returns in the model. I think it's helpful to kind of bring that point home. But then after that, we really dive into some acquisition accounting and kind of making sure that we understand how the balance sheet in an LBO balances and how all of that stuff works and how purchase price allocation will impact an LBO.